Wolf Pack, what's going on? It's your boy, the Wolf of Roto Street. RotoStreetJournal.com. We breed and feed you fantasy wolves here with your Week 9 waiver wire pickups. Top 10. We've also got a monster day of trades. In fact, 10 trades today, the most in NFL history. We're going to go rapid fire breakdown, just a quick hit, no nitty gritty stats, just where I see risers, fallers from each individual trade. Until then, we'll get into your waiver wire pickups, your first checks, all that good stuff to give you everything you need to get ready to dominate in Week 9. Over halfway done with the fantasy season, folks. It is flying by. Let's make sure we dominate. As you guys get in here, that thumbs up button does help us get out to so many more people, whether you're catching the replay, whether you're here live. Already got 10, 20 of you so far. So greatly appreciated. Thank you for joining in. Get to all your questions at the end of my top 10 pickups and, of course, the defensive streamers of the week. So get those questions on in. I'm sure there's a bunch with a ton of action. But as mentioned, we're going to go through all the trades real quick, telling you who we think were the risers, fallers, all that good stuff. And I'm just going to go in order of the way I saw them today. TJ Hawkinson going to the Vikings, the rare interdivision trade. Huge boost, obviously, to Amon-Ra St. Brown. He already was the target magnet, the engine of this offense, but even more so now. We saw last year down the stretch run, he was the number one receiver in all of fantasy, alternating weeks with Cooper Kupp, but ultimately finished with 4 points. If you look at just the fantasy playoffs, he was a monster, and a big part of that was no Hawkinson. Swift was out as well, but this just makes that concentrated target share that much more so. DeAndre Swift also going to probably benefit from more targets being available. And whether it's Josh Reynolds, Jamal Williams, if DJ Chark ever comes alive, other number 2 receivers will also have a chance. They have some backup tight ends. Like Nick Wright had 2 top 10 tight end days over the last 5 weeks once TJ Hawkins was out last week. They have a really athletic rookie. I believe his name is Jesse Palmer, something of that nature. I just slipped my mind right now. But ultimately, tore his ACL, was drafted really late because of it. He could be a sneaky dynasty ad in the wake of this. But the big winners coming from the Lions side, I think it's neutral for the other Vikings receivers. They're already target hogs. Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. Obviously, though, a big down for Irv Smith. He's going to be out anyways for 8 to 10 weeks, which probably prompted this deal in the first place. Huge down. Obviously, no reason to keep him except for in dynasty leagues. Hawkinson himself, I considered about a neutral to maybe a slight loss, whereas he was the number 2, 3 target with the Lions in a very pass-happy, just needing to keep the pedal to the metal all the time offense. This is now more of a run-heavy, balanced attack. He'll be behind Justin Jefferson, be behind Adam Thielen pretty clearly. Probably more shots at touchdowns, though, there. Moving on to Chase Claypool, going to the Bears. This is a huge win for, similar to the Lions situation with TJ Hawkinson leaving. Big win for Steelers pass catchers, especially George Pickens, who has been 3rd on the target totem pole, despite leading the team in receiving yards since Kenny Pickett took over. Deontay Johnson gets a little more stability here. And, of course, Freiermuth as well, who's become maybe the most consistent option of all their pass catchers, also gets a nice boost here. Maybe they run more 2 tight end sets as well to keep him on the field. That's really the only time he's being pulled out during 2 tight end sets. Justin Fields, also a big winner. We're going to talk about him in much more depth, but getting an actual NFL caliber receiver cannot hurt this guy who's already surging. We'll go more detail when we get to our top 10 waiver wire pickups, but he is by far and away my number 1 waiver wire pickup at quarterback this week, and I think he could be a top 10 quarterback from here on out, especially over these next 3 weeks where he's got a cakewalk schedule. Big down for Mooney. He already low volume attack. Yes, he's been above 50-plus yards in 4 or 5 straight weeks, but Claypool's a different level of beast here. I do think he'll step right into that number 1 role within a week or 2 after he gets a rapport down with Justin Fields. Komet already was useless. Like everybody else, we talk about Velus Jones or N'Keal Harry, people you didn't give a shit about anyway, so we don't need to worry about calling them fallers. Mooney's the only one you may have actually cared about. I do consider it about a neutral for Claypool because I do think he'll ascend to the number 1 target here, but he's going to be going from one of the top 5 pass-happy attacks to a clear-cut bottom 5 pass attack. So it's about neutral in that he'll see more target share. It's just a matter of, is there going to be fewer targets, even though he was about 3rd on the target totem pole in Pittsburgh, moving to number 1. Maybe they balance each other out. Probably a slight loss, though, for Claypool. But, hey, maybe he could just emerge as a weekly weapon. They did give him a 2nd-round pick, so clearly you don't give that type of draft capital without big plans in mind. Moving forward, another guy I'll go into a little bit more depth later, but Jeff Wilson to the Dolphins. I think he's the single biggest winner of the fantasy deadline. I think he's going to take over this role eventually. You guys know how much I love Jeff Wilson, so I should preface this with I am a huge Jeff Wilson aficionado. You might call me psycho for it. I've been very impressed with what Raheem Mostert's done. I've always really liked Raheem Mostert throughout his career too. But we know it's a sports card just waiting to break down. We know Jeff Wilson has familiarity with Mike McDaniel's scheme. We'll dive into some of his numbers from 2020 when these two were in the backfield duo together. It's very damn impressive. So Jeff Wilson, big winner. It is a down for Mostert, just having a guy that probably will take the goal line work, good in pass catching situations, a great pass protector in particular. It just, again, has great familiarity and great success under Mike McDaniels. So I do imagine he eats into Mostert's workload more than Chase Edmonds was, for example, who would be considered a huge loser, except for the fact that the only other loser here is Gaskin, by the way. Chase Edmonds, though, going to the Broncos. This is not a very troublesome depth chart for him to ultimately ascend to the top two. Now, granted, he's looked pretty shitty throughout this year, but the one thing he does well is catch patches. They have not been using him in that, with Mostert running more routes over the last 4 straight weeks. But Edmonds had great receiving grades coming into the year. I don't think that talent has just completely erased. And we know the Broncos are targeting their running backs the second most percent of any team in the NFL right now. So I could see Edmonds maybe regaining a little bit of value here. If anything, though, it might just make a gross situation between Latavius Murray and Melvin Gordon that much grosser. I do probably consider this a situation where I don't want any of these guys at this point. It's just too gross of an offense. Are we really looking for 3-headed committees in the league's second fewest points scoring offense right now? I don't think so. I don't really see the value in that. So it just seems muddier to me. Maybe Edmonds emerges as like the lead pass catcher and carves out some sort of value. But to me, it just makes Murray droppable, makes Gordon probably droppable too. And Chase Edmonds himself doesn't need to be a priority pickup, even in a new situation. Last redraft trade of importance is Nyheim Hines going to the Bills. This is a big win for Jonathan Taylor, who maybe gets finally the 8 to 9 targets a game that he deserves. He's a quality receiver. He's, again, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. He's not an elite Eckler level route runner or anything of that nature. But Taylor, when he gets into space, man, he can gallop it. I would like to see him suddenly get 7, 8 targets now a game. Big win for him. I do think it's a win for Hines going to a more explosive offense, averaging nearly 12 more points per game. They've clearly, the Bills, been trying to get a pass catching back after going after McKissick, then drafting James Cook overall too. And clearly they're not in the second round. Clearly they're not all that happy with what they've gotten. So they go and get Nyheim Hines, who's second in the NFL since joining the league in yards per route run. Anything else, nothing else rather. Nyheim Hines can run routes, and he can catch the ball. He can protect. He can fill that role that they clearly are looking for. So it is a big loss to James Cook, probably a bit of a ding to Devin Singletary, who's been around a 70% snap player all year. He's one of the lowest 3 backs since he entered the league in yards per route run. So I imagine he's going to take a big hit on passing down work, which hurts. Definitely hurts for Singletary. Caps the ceiling a bit, even if he remains a 60% or so workload guy. Losing that pass catching work would be big. It definitely, as we mentioned, caps the breakout appeal of James Cook, who would definitely have been a top 10 waiver wire pick this week had a move not happened. It sucks. Deion Jackson, the other guy we got to mention here as a big winner, the clear-cut handcuff to JT, who's been, as we've seen, dinged up throughout the entire season. And the one start he got, Deion Jackson, was the running back 1 in fantasy football with 10 catches on 10 targets. In fact, he's caught 14 of 14 targets so far on the year. Had 28 fantasy points that week. Definitely clears the path for him to be that number 1 clear-cut handcuff to JT, with probably a little bit of standalone sprinkle in at this point. So definitely a big win for him. The other big trade, just to mention all the trades of the day, is Calvin Ridley going to the Jags. We still have so much to shake out that I don't want to spend a ton of time here, because one, who knows when he'll be reinstated, if it's next year, which seems likely. It'd be pretty absurd to not. Let's assume he is. Good spot for him, but is Trevor Lawrence any better than whatever, probably a top 5 quarterback going to the Falcons? Well, the way they're playing right now, maybe not. So I don't know. I'm not sure exactly how this shakes out. Christian Kirk, Drake London, both can command targets. I think Drake London has more of the alpha build. So If anything, I do think this might be a better spot for Ridley to reemerge as that clear-cut wide receiver one, the top 10 receiver we saw in back-to-back seasons till that brutal leaving the team and then obviously the suspension afterwards. So it's still let's wait and see this one out, but I don't think it's necessarily a negative for his dynasty value. If Lawrence can finally recoup anything, it will be because of guys like Calvin Ridley being on the outside. Christian Kirk, you can't say the Jags haven't at least tried to get this guy weapons across the last few years. So if next year doesn't happen for Trevor Lawrence, I think it's fair to start tossing that bust label out. But I'm not going to do it quite yet. Clearly the team wants him to succeed, and I respect that indeed. Again, Wolfpack, we have about 25 with us. That's so awesome. Thank you so much. That wraps up our trade portion of this. Hopefully that gives you some helpful information on a real quick, just rapid fire, 10 minutes or under of everything you need to know for the trade deadline. Let us know if you liked it with that thumbs up button. Would be so appreciated. Let's dive into the guys you should first check. I'm not going to go into depth here, but I want to make sure you guys recognize a few of these guys. I have a pretty big list, but again, I don't want to go into too much depth. George Pickens, 63% rostered. Obviously, the clear-cut, clearer path to targets here with no Chase Claypool. Khalil Herbert, 64%. He is continuing to take over the backfield. 16 carries, 99 yards, and 1 score. Third straight week, he has outrushed Montgomery on fewer touches, continuing to look like the better option. The hot hand is going to take over soon enough, so make sure you are on the right side of that one. Nyheim Hines, we just mentioned, 55% rostered himself. A lot of impatient owners cutting him. Now in a very fruitful fantasy situation with the Bills on a role they've clearly targeted. Could be great. Garrett Wilson and Romeo Doubs, 2 impressive rookies throughout the year, are only rostered in 48% of leagues right now. People got a little frustrated with him, and understandably so. It's been up or down for both, but Wilson coming in with a 100-yard day when the team was trailing and Zach Wilson had to chuck. It was clear they wanted to go to him. Elijah Moore was the wide receiver 5 in this game, benched, and who knows, now that he hasn't been traded, if they'll try to repair that bridge and get him back more heavily involved. But it looked to me like Garrett Wilson has taken over as the clear-cut number 1. Definitely check your waiver wire, see if he got dropped. As check for Romeo Doubs. Injuries to Christian Watson, Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb. The last man standing is Romeo Doubs. That is a beautiful touchdown catch. Anybody watching the game gets the Lions this week, a great stream spot for him to continue to build on that success, build that trust up with Aaron Rodgers. So both those guys could have been in my top 10. They do meet that 50% or fewer threshold, but in most competitive leagues, they're probably not there. So I just wanted to mention them, as do I want to mention Kadarius Toney, more highly rostered than either of those 2 rookies, despite barely playing a snap this year. Why? Because he's on the Chiefs now. Very exciting offense to be a part of. I don't think this is an immediate you can use him, but as a stash, let's see how quickly he can get involved with this offense. We know that Andy Reid is a master at scheming, especially with quick twitch, speedy guys. This isn't Tyreek Hill level of player, but this is a similar talent and skill set that he brings Kadarius Toney. Remember, his only real game of action as a rookie last year, he had 180 yards, 89 yards to be more specific. He's a beast. He was one of the best rookie receivers last year in yards per route run and target share per route. Just some of the most predictive metrics for rookies in particular. Kadarius Toney was towards the top of it. So go check him. And also check for Gallup. 6 catches. Really, the team made a concerted effort to get him going again. And it was great to see. 52% rostered right now. They are on bye week. So I don't think you'll have to bid a ton to get Gallup. If somebody dropped him heading into this week, look for him. Alrighty, Wolfpack. Let's dive into my top 10 guys that are 50% or fewer rostered. I tried to get at least a handful that were under 40%. The vast majority of them actually are. So let's start with Jeff Wilson, my number 1 waiver wire ad of the week. That might seem insane for a guy that's getting traded to be in a backup situation, right? Well, as I mentioned at the top, Jeff Wilson is behind Raheem Mostert, a sports car that, yes, he has flashed very, very well this season. He's worked as a pseudo bell cow throughout the season so far for Miami. He's ran the most routes on the team. He's seen around 70 to 80% of the weekly carries for the last 5 weeks, and he's looked really good doing it. This is no fault of Mostert. I just think Jeff Wilson might be the better player throughout this year. 12.3, 11.6, 13.4, 20.2, and then he had that dud against Atlanta that killed us all. But overall, he was a top 20 to top 12 running back throughout the first 4 weeks that he started. Very, very solid. Looks right back to form. He's actually has one of the top 3 ball carrier speeds on the year on that touchdown he scored against the Rams. Looking real solid. What's the real appeal, though, is, of course, if something does happen to Mostert. We've seen how good this Dolphins offense is. The run game is churning. They obviously, between Tyreek Hill and Waddle, are dominating yardage shares here. I'm a really, really big fan of if Jeff Wilson becomes a starter. I think this is a top 6 offense in the league. And I think he would be right like he was in 2020 when he took over for an injured Raheem Mostert. In 5 games played without Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson averaged 21.6 fantasy points per game. That would be top 3 in 2022 right now. He scored, a touchdown per game, nearly a 17 touchdown pace. He averaged, rushing yards, 78.4. He was on pace for 1,333 rush yards without Raheem Mostert in the lineup. He had, in those 5 starts, 4 of them were top 5 fantasy numbers over 20 points, 21.9, 32, 27.4, 23.8. That ceiling is massive. And remember, Mike McDaniels was his offensive coordinator, the run game coordinator, rather, went out and made sure to go get this guy. I am a big fan of Jeff Wilson. I think if you don't need an immediate right now, you got to plug him in. I think this is the highest upside waiver wire guy that's out there right now. I think it's a matter of time, whether it's outplaying Raheem Mostert or the usual injury for Raheem Mostert. I expect Jeff Wilson to take this thing over by, let's call it Thanksgiving. Rondale Moore, if you need an immediate plug-in, and certainly if you need a receiver, is by far my favorite ad. 25 to 20, maybe even 30% FAAB for both him and Jeff Wilson, the top 2 picks. And just as like an overview of the waiver wire before I get too much more in depth on Rondale Moore, I would say this is a weird one where 1 through 10, I really like them all to the point of like 10% FAAB or more on all 10 of my guys. I don't have any that are like, I need to bid 100% of my FAAB. Again, Jeff Wilson at the top, about a 25 to 30% FAAB guy, in my opinion. So there's no one that's a must hit, but top to bottom, this is a solid waiver wire with a lot of guys you want to make sure to double check on. That's my general thoughts on the overall position. And again, my number 1 wide receiver, Rondale Moore, probably worth 20 to 25% of your FAAB. Coming off an 8 target, 7 catch, 92 yard and DeAndre Hopkins played 1 fewer snap, meaning he was on the field for pretty much every single play, over 75 plays for Rondale Moore, and back in the comfy confines of the slot with Robbie Anderson out there, with DeAndre Hopkins out there. Moore was in there for 2 wide receiver sets with DeAndre Hopkins. He was in there for all the 3rd receiver sets, kicked into the slot where he does his best damage, looking really, really solid, breaking tackles on that 38-yard score, just juking, great speed, everything you wanted to see from the guy. Good schedule moving forward, too. And we got an offense rounding into form. Since Hopkins came back, 42 and 26 points for the Cardinals. They still don't feel like they've hit their full gear quite yet, but they are running over 70 plays per game. That is the most in the NFL. Just creates a big pie for the entire offense, especially the receiving game. I do think more of these efforts out of Rondale Moore are coming. Big fan of him. You need a quarterback. There is nobody you should go after harder than Justin Fields. 17 and 23 for 151, 2 scores through the air. By far his best passing day against the hardest passing matchup, the Cowboys, that he's faced. The big thing, though, is the 8 carries, 60 yards, and the touchdown. The Konami upside is finally, it only took 2 seasons and a half, but it is finally being unlocked here for Justin Fields. In fact, over his last 4 games, 42 rush attempts, 278 yards, and 2 touchdowns, back-to-back weeks now. That's just under 10 fantasy points per game on just his rushing stats alone. If you look at the full season of Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, that's more than either of them. He's number 2 in terms of rush attempts, rushing yards, and the touchdowns. It looks like every time they get in the red zone, they dial him up. It's kind of like Jalen Hurts out there, kind of unstoppable. He's the right now leading quarterbacks in evasion rate, broken tackle rate, and 3rd in yards after contact. So it's not like just chukes and speed. This guy's breaking tackles at a great clip right now. Those designed runs have been the real boon to it. And the best part of it all, after going a top 12 quarterback for 4 straight weeks, the last month scoring the 5th most points among all QBs, he now gets the easiest part of his schedule by a mile. He's had almost every single matchup a bottom 5 matchup. Now he gets 3 straight top 5 matchups: Miami, Detroit, and Atlanta from weeks 9, 10, and 11. Beautiful stuff. The offense has gone 33 and 29 points over their past 2 weeks, so this is not like the stay away, can't touch it offense that we were used to. And again, a huge part of them unlocking it is using Fields as a rusher. And never mind the fact that they have added Chase Claypool. And as a passer, Justin Fields is averaging the highest average depth of target in the entire NFL, the highest ADOT among all passers. So when he throws it, he is chucking it deep, and he just got a freakish receiver and Claypool added here. Huge fan of Justin Fields. I consider him a top 12 quarterback rest of season, maybe even top 8, especially after we see how these 3 green light matchups, the first 3 green matchups he's had all year. Let's see how those go. Huge fan of Justin Fields on this week's waiver wire. You need a tight end. So I've kind of given you my top at each position. It just kind of shakes out. That's how the top 5 worked, because I really like all these guys. I consider every single one of them a viable starter at their respective positions. Craig Dulcich, 41% rostered. Now, he's going into his bye week, which might drive down how much you have to bid on him. I would say 18 to 20% if you're needy at tight end. Why? Because this guy has been a top 12 tight end every single week he's been on the field of his first 3 weeks of actions. 12, 11, and 12.7 fantasy points through his last 3 games. His only 3 games, rather. 82% of snaps last week was a season high after seeing right around 60, 65% through his first 2 weeks. Nearly an every down player. Love to see it. Was in on 2 touchdown sets. Love to see it. And it was only 5 targets after 9 targets last week. Regressed a little bit there. Only 4 catches compared to 6 the week before. But it's the 114 air yards you love to see. The guy is an athlete. Greg Dulcich is streaking down the field, broken plays. That drive, I mean, there was a drive that was Dulcich, like the game-winning drive. He became the guy that they needed to go to. I only think he continues to ascend. He's one of the few guys Russell Wilson actually seems comfortable with throwing to him. So big fan of Greg Dulcich. In fact, he has 182 receiving yards through his first 3 career games. That is the most all-time, behind only Aaron Hernandez and Randy McMichael. So pretty damn solid stuff from Dulcich. Moving forward, Josh Palmer, you need a receiver streamer for this week and maybe the next 4 or so for however long Mike Williams is out. I think Palmer is in a great spot. Now, he hasn't really blown up much, and with Keenan Allen out, it's a little disappointing. We expect more, but he's also been pretty damn solid. Like no top 20 games, but 2 top 25, fantasy viable in 3 of his 5 starts so far this year. Seen a 17% or higher target share in 4 of the 5 weeks without Keenan Allen. One of those games, he also got hurt, so good chance he would have been 17% or higher in all 5 of his games so far without Keenan Allen. He's only played 1 career game. Now, Keenan Allen probably back this week, although he isn't practicing yet. It's Tuesday. Still hasn't practiced, so maybe we don't even get Keenan Allen this week. We know Mike Williams is out for weeks, not days. He's probably going to be moved to the IR this week. The one time that Josh Palmer played without Mike Williams, put up 15.3 fantasy points, 5 catches, 43 yards, a touchdown. And he also had Austin Eckler endorse him on this week's podcast saying, you got to go out and get Josh Palmer, fantasy owners. Remember last year when we got the stamp of Eckler? It was Justin Jackson as his backup, and Jackson put up 30 fantasy points. Doesn't obviously mean that Palmer is going to be correlated with that, but all the training camp reviews were raving about Josh Palmer, the clear-cut number 3, every day staying late with Justin Herbert to work it up. There's a good chance he could be their number 1 receiver this week if Keenan Allen sits or something gets aggravated. Huge fan. Never mind the fact he's facing Atlanta, the best matchup for wide receivers right now. So at least for this week, if you just need a 1-week, bye-week filler, you couldn't ask for a better option than Josh Palmer. But I think you got at least 4 to 5 weeks for however long Mike Williams is out. And even when he comes back, maybe just Palmer cements his role so much here. Pretty soft schedule here for Justin Herbert. I think he's one of the best buy lows right now. 4 of his next 5 matchups are bottom 10 defenses, and that obviously means good things for his receivers too. Big fan of Josh Palmer. Don't want to go into too much depth because I continue to talk about this guy each and every week, but at 45% rostered, it's your last call on Kyren Williams. The really only new note to add here, if you want more takes on him, go back to other shows. 3 or 4 in a row I've been talking about Kyren. The only new note here, though, is the Rams used 3 running backs on Sunday. None of them top 41% of the snaps, which means nobody's the clear RB1 right now. It is wide open. Also important is Darrell Henderson, 4 carries, 16 yards, 2 receptions, 14 yards, hitting absolute rock bottom, being out-touched 12-6 by undrafted rookie Ronnie Rivers. Yes, that's a real human, folks. Ronnie Rivers. I have no idea what to make of that, but ultimately, Rivers didn't do anything with his touches. All I see is a humongous opportunity. Cam Akers didn't get traded. They said he's going to be welcomed back. So ultimately, maybe he's back in a 3-headed nightmare, and that does potentially make Williams a little less attractive. But they've only praised this guy so far. Despite his inability to stay on the field, Schefter talked about how much the team loves him. McVay himself saying how much they cannot wait to welcome in the award winner for the most versatile player in college football last year after racking up 359 receiving yards, 1,002 rushing yards, 17 total touchdowns. Very, very solid, versatile threat. That not a great athlete, but production was insane for this guy. Scouts said he has an Austin Eckler-style ceiling. I think it's a huge hyperbole. But ultimately, there's upside. How many more just pure lottery tickets are we going to see this year? I don't think many. And this could absolutely be one if this Rams offense could get going. A guy that I can't understand why he is so undervalued right now, Donovan Peoples-Jones. Over his last 5 games, he's had at least 71 receiving yards in 4 of those 5 games. He's had no fewer than 9 fantasy points, but he's been over 11 fantasy points in 4 of those 5 games. He's seen 9, 7, 5, 6, and 4 targets, and he's making the most of them with a 71, 74, 71, and 81 yards. The guy's been great. He's getting it done with Jacoby Brissett. That in itself is a humongous feat. In just a couple of weeks, he's going to be welcoming back Deshaun Watson, who in his last full season was the top-graded deep passer by Pro Football Focus's QB rating on 20-plus yard throws. Peoples-Jones had an amazing rapport, according to all camp reports, with Deshaun Watson. Had actually emerged as the go-to guy ahead of Amari Cooper, according to certain beat reports. So I think these guys could hit it off huge, and Peoples-Jones could be a league winner down your stretch. And you're also getting 11-ish points a week from him right now. What's not to love? Why do people not want to talk about these guys? So 10 to 15%, 20% if you're desperate for a wide receiver right now isn't unreasonable for DPJ. Big fan of Peoples-Jones. Isaiah Pacheco, 34% rostered right now. Last time out, he started. Remember that huge Sunday he had rap sheet? Pacheco took all the first-team reps, and he's going to start today, and everybody lost their mind, including myself. Why wouldn't we? It's the Chiefs' backfield. Anyone starting, even if they only ultimately see 30% of the snaps. Underwhelming, yes, but still well worth a look. A lot of people cut him with the bye week, with the frustration over probably some unrealistic expectations for what he was going to do. He was replaced at the goal line by CEH. It wasn't a great start. None of us are going to argue that. But still, how many times have we seen, especially with the Chiefs, post-bye rookie bumps where we see an uptick in usage? They also have a much softer second half schedule. And that is when we've seen Pacheco come in, when they've got a 2+ score lead, bleeding the clock out. He looks good too. Like, this isn't a plotter we're recommending. Every time he's on the field, there's a little bit of extra zip, a little bit more burst, just a tougher runner than CEH right now. Who's to say he doesn't take over the goal line role? I know Hilaire's been scoring at will right now, but there's every single opportunity for Pacheco to take that over. So I think with some more time to burn, with a softer schedule, with that post-bye rookie bump potentially looming, he is definitely worth a bench stash. So check your waiver wires, see if Pacheco has been dropped. Similar to Kyren, I don't want to go too much in depth on this guy because I've been talking about him legitimately every single week of the waiver wire. But here's your weekly reminder to pick up Rachaad White, 30% rostered. Same as always, hovering right now around 30 to 40% of the snaps, 7 to 10 touches. A little bit of usability there, not much, but he is among the top 2 handcuffs in fantasy football. Fournette's looking washed. He's looking slow right now. And he has missed time in every single season, including 3 or more games in 4 of his 5 seasons. It's only a matter of time till Rachaad White is starting in this backfield. If you've got the bench stash space, go and do it. If you want to know what potential league mates think of this guy, in my league, I just got Justin Fields by trade. I gave up Rachaad White to get Justin Fields. I gave him every single bench running back that he wanted to look at. Could have been Brian Robinson. It could have been Gus Edwards. he decided I'd rather have Rachaad White in the upside. And I honestly, that was the one I was hoping he wouldn't say because of how much upside Rachaad White has. So go and get yourself this lottery ticket. It's going to be cashed in at some point, and it's going to be massive. Reminder, he was on level with McCaffrey, with Eckler, with Joe Mixon in terms of his Pro Football Focus receiving grades. He's elite. He yards per out run more than some of those guys. Just unbelievable. Alvin Kamara on that par level. And yeah, it hasn't looked incredible so far this year, but I really think if he took over, he would win leagues. Last top 10 guy before a few honorable mentions, of course, your defensive streamers, and then all of your questions. Kenyan Drake, 2 of his last 3 weeks, 19.7 and 16.7 fantasy points. If you've been watching the show a while, you know I love Kenyan Drake. I've always loved Kenyan Drake. It's gotten me in some trouble in the past, but when we know he's going to get a workload, I will always go to that well, and I very rarely regret it. When he gets the work, he's typically performed well. Had some really explosive runs over those last 3 games. Yes, there's a huge dud when a lot of people probably started in that half-point game. Awful. But 127 and a touchdown in week 6 against the Giants, 67 and a score against Tampa Bay. Solid stuff, and he has run 17 and 23 routes in those 2 contests. Clearly the top pass-catching option here with no J.K. Dobbins. Justice Hill ain't doing much. So I really like Kenyan Drake. The risk here is you have to wait it out till Monday when they face the Saints. Not that great of a matchup in the first place. Gus Edwards' hamstring injury isn't all that major. The real reason I think Drake might start is because they have a bye coming up next week. So if you're going to start from Kenyan Drake in a mediocre matchup, I think he makes the most of his touches yet again and has himself a pretty big day. Now, as I get to my honorable mentions, Wolfpack, we got about 40 with you live. I love to see it. Thank you so much. That thumbs up button would be so greatly appreciated. I know it's annoying, but if you're new here as well, consider subscribing so we can continue to plunge our way towards 3,000 subscribers. It's been a great season of growth. It is so greatly appreciated that you're here spending your time listening to my takes. I hope you like some of them at least, and if you do, that thumbs up button would be so greatly appreciated. Let's give you a handful of other names I am looking for on the waiver wire before hitting the defensive streamers of the week. Starting with Deion Jackson. We mentioned him at the top with the Nyheim Hines trade. His only start, he was the running back 1 in fantasy. So you got that handcuff value, one of the best in fantasy, it looks like. This is a different offense, let's be real. It's Sam Ehlinger's, does not look like nearly the pass-happy attack that Matty Ice was leading. I still don't understand what that team's doing, to be honest. Nonetheless, if something happens to Taylor, you're getting yourself a top 15 running back play. And if something doesn't happen, I think he slides Deion Jackson right into that Nyheim Hines style role and becomes a 5 to 6 target guy, even with Taylor in there. This is a guy who has 85th percentile speed and only 109 snaps, seen 14 targets and caught all 14 of them. Pretty damn efficient. Isaiah Likely had himself a monster day with Mark Andrews going out in the first quarter. Likely then for the last 3 quarters had 7 targets, 6 catches, 77 yards, and a score. We know this offense runs through the tight end. It was just great to get confirmation that if something ever happens to Mark Andrews, if Mark Andrews, say, the injury lingers into week 9 here with the bye looming, Likely will be a top 7 tight end because he'll be the main vein of this passing attack. It's a guy that put up 144 yards in the preseason in just 2 games and really just 3 total quarters of action. The guy was a monster. So I really like Isaiah Likely, Everett boy, local product. Shout him out. Definitely has to be in consideration. Again, similar to Drake, the only rub here is it's Monday Night Football. We don't know if Andrews will be ruled out ahead of time or if he'll even get ruled out in the first place, because if not, then Likely is burning a hole in your tight end spot. So be careful there. DeAndre Carter could be a nice fill-in as well with the Falcons matchup. If you miss out on Palmer and you're desperate for a streamer, if Keenan Allen sits, I think Carter himself, maybe even Michael Bandy, would have some receiver streamability. And as you guys know, Jaylen Warren, have to mention this guy, only 5% rostered, but playing more and more snaps as the weeks go by. Last week, I was hovering right around 40% of the snaps, was the primary third down back with 7 of the 9 third down snaps, and he is outplaying Najee Harris by a significant margin. 6 carries, 40 yards for Warren, 8 carries for 32 for Harris, 25 yards on just 3 catches, 8.3 yards per reception for Warren, and 8.3 yards per attempt for Warren. compared to just 26 yards on 6 catches for Harris. He looks like a slug. He looks like he's stuck in the mud every time he's running. And Jaylen Warren is bringing juice that the coaches are recognizing and praising him for. So Warren definitely is a nice stash that could probably get to Rachaad White levels of usability if we keep seeing those snaps go up. So that rounds up my honorable mentions, Wolfpack. Thank you again for hearing those out. Here are my top 10. Let me bring you my top 9, my top week 9 defensive streamers. Just making sure I have, there they are. So we've got Bengals, just quickly typing them in. I forgot to before the show. Chiefs, Vikings. All righty. Thank you for that. Quick patient here. Here are my top defensive streamers for week 9. Cincinnati Bengals get the Carolina Panthers. Beautiful spot. My number 5 defense for week 9. They're 43% rostered, so not the most widely available unit, but under 50%. So give them a look. They've held 5 of their 7 opponents below 20 points. They haven't been overly opportunistic right now, but against the Browns, they did rack up 2 sacks, an interception, a fumble recovery. So they ended up finishing with 7 points despite giving up 32, a season high 32 points nonetheless. So good spot there after a bad game. This team has some upside, the biggest of it being they're facing the Carolina Panthers, who, yeah, PJ Walker's giving them a little more life. We just saw them put up over 34 real-life points. Like, they looked good, but they've given up the 9th most points per game to defenses. This is a Bengals team that is going to be fired up, coming off a loss, needing a win. I think they just smother PJ Walker and the Panthers, force a few more turnovers than we've been accustomed to. It is an 8-point favorite. Big fan of the Panthers, the matchup, the players overall, good stuff. I also might like the Vikings even more than them, facing the Commanders, who, yes, they're winning with Taylor Heineke. The offense still isn't great right now. They've only scored 20 or more points once since week 2. They're giving up the 5th most points to fantasy defenses. And Minnesota is playing really, really well as a defense. 10 sacks, 4 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries across their last 2 games, including 6-sack effort against Kyler Murray last week. 2 interceptions to go with those as well. 21 sacks on the season. That's 10th most among all defenses right now for the Vikings. Facing an offense that's surrendered 20 sacks. A bad offensive line. They've given up, like mentioned, the 5th most points to defenses. As 4-point road favorites, I think the Vikings can once again be a very, very viable fantasy defense. 13 and 10 points in back-to-back weeks, top 10 for both of those metrics. Very, very solid stuff. And the last Hail Mary option, I recommended these guys 2 weeks ago before their bye week. They got me 13 points. They did not disappoint. That's the Chiefs. Now, they have given up 20 or more points in every single game so far this year. It's not a team that's going to limit the points scored, that's for sure. A lot of that is because they get up early and they play a little bit more shell, and ultimately teams will get down them. But this is the exact script you want to use them. A team that doesn't want to pass, being forced to pass, and then the turnovers come. It's a very opportunistic and sack-happy defense when the script gets flipped. And that is exactly what happened with the 49ers 2 weeks ago, and that's exactly what happens against the Titans here. Now, Derrick Henry might just go berserk. They're not good against the run, and Derrick Henry might go for 200 yards, 2 scores, and suddenly this defense is looking atrocious. But if the offense can get up big early, I'm thinking about like the Buffalo Bills game. Yes, they have a much better defense than the Chiefs do. But still, that could be the script here. They get down by 2-3 scores early and have to abandon Derrick Henry. That's when they get in trouble. Whether it's Tannehill or even better, if it's Malik Willis under center at that point, it won't really matter because both those guys suck when they have to come back. That is when we'll see the Chiefs make their money. They've had multiple sacks in 5 of their 7 games. They have 2 games with 5+ sacks. They've forced 5 fumble recoveries, which is right towards the top of the league. Now they're rested after a bye week. They're favored by 11 against Tennessee, who they're projected to score 18 or fewer points across all the books here. It just seems like the right script to bank on the Chiefs. So I would rank my streamers 1, Bengals, 43% rostered, 2, Vikings, 24% rostered, definitely most likely to be out there for you, and then 3, the Chiefs, 32% rostered, all very solid options. And if none of them are out there, if you're completely desperate, I would say the Cardinals at Seattle. They've had some really solid games. Now, last week they only scored 6 fantasy points, but overall, across their last 3 weeks, This is a defense that's rostered by pretty much no one. I think they're 4% rostered right now. They've gone 14, 17, and 6. Defensive 3, 3, and 15. Not a bad spot to potentially use them. Seattle has been good at limiting turnovers, but it's still Seattle. They'll be back at home here. So I don't mind the Cardinals. If you're like desperate and then those guys were all gone, they do fall into my top 11 fantasy defenses this week as well. All righty, Wolfpack. That wraps up our trade talk, our defensive streamers, and of course, my top 10 waiver wire picks and honorable mentions. Let me now dive on into a pretty loaded mailbag. I'm excited to see that. Nearly 50 questions. Great stuff. We'll hit them all as we get to these questions. Wolfpack, please do consider hitting that thumbs up. And if you're catching the replay, you might be hitting the shutdown button, or maybe you want to hear what people are asking. Either way, you want to get your question answered. I'll be live every Tuesday, 7 p.m. for your waiver wire show, as well as Thursday for your sit starts, Sunday for your sit starts, and Sunday for your recap. We're 4 times live, baby, to answer all your questions. So if you're new around here, please do consider subscribing. It helps us out so we can help you out. Awesome. Let's dive in, Wolfpack. My man, Charlie Menelakis. Tight end stream this week. Conklin, Otten, Likely, or Logan T. So to me, it's likely if we get any type of rumblings that it's clear Andrew's going to sit. He'll be a top 10 play. If not him, Conklin was one of my guys that probably should have been an honorable mention after 2 touchdowns, after running a ton of routes. Really, really solid stuff from here. I can't go back to Otten. He did have a touchdown negated by a penalty and looked solid. He's been pretty good with Brady all year. It still makes me sick. And Logan Thomas, not yet. So it's Likely or Conklin. If we know Andrew's going to be out, it's Likely. If not, I'll go back to Conklin after he really took back over for CJ Uzomah. Probably the number 1 tight end ad, if not for Likely this week. And Greg Dulcich, of course. Need a streamer. Palmer, Moore, Gerald Everett for Tien Nguyen. I like all these guys. I think I'm leaning Rondale Moore after that 8-target, 7-catch day. Palmer's not a bad option, though, against that horrendous Atlanta secondary giving up the most points to wide receivers. So I like all these options, including Everett again against that bad pass D, but I'd probably go Rondale here, Tien. More valuable rest of season, Wilson or Hines? I'm leaning Wilson there. I think Hines will definitely play a nice real-life role for the Bills that they clearly have been going after for a long time, but there is so many mouths to feed there, whereas, yes, of course, Tyreek and Jalen Waddle, 2 humongous mouths to feed Miami, but they also do want to keep that run established all games. We've seen Mostert averaging right around 17 to 18 carries per game these last 4 weeks. I just feel like the breakdown's inevitable, as it always is with Mostert. And even if not, Wilson might outplay him. He has looked damn good this year. So I'd rather have Jeff Wilson myself. Good questions. And he's answering Conklin, Everett, and Wilson. Thank you, Daniel, for participating, answering some questions. We're aligned in the Wilson-Conklin phase there. I do lean more over Everett, just slightly. Who do I bench after this week? Najee, Saquon, Etienne, or Foreman? So I would say you're not ever benching Saquon or Etienne. As long as they're in, they're in. I think Najee can hit the bench, honestly. Foreman looked damn good. So I think Najee has the bye this week. So obviously you're starting Foreman. That gives you a good chance to give him another tryout. We see another week like last week. What was it? 20 carries, 120 yards, and 3 touchdowns, 31 fantasy points. Whew. So, yeah, Najee is probably the one I bench here. Dearness Fuckface Johnson getting the boot. Yeah, I know. Didn't even get traded. Hunt didn't get traded. No reason to hang on to him anymore. Fields or Geno? I'm going Fields. I love the Miami matchup. I love the production we're seeing. Geno's a safer option, but I love the upside of Fields right now. Daniel, answer these questions and looking great with that. We're really aligned here. Appreciate that, bud. Your help here answering people's questions. I don't know if you're still here. Feel free. I didn't even comment. I know my man David Campanelli is probably sitting there like, why is he not putting the call in? My bad, brother. Call in live. Maybe Daniel, you want to call in? Seems like you got some good fantasy insight yourself. I just messaged in the call-in link. So anybody that wants to call in and chat their waiver wire, trade, anything, questions, you can do that now, and I'll help you jump the line. Does Jeff Wilson start over Mostert? No. I don't think Mostert's been so damn good. I think Mostert's the preferred option, at least to start. But I wouldn't be shocked to see Wilson eventually take it over. And again, the real upside, the thesis behind why Wilson's my number 1 pickup is Mostert always gets hurt. And Wilson has been a monster when he's with San Fran taking over that role. I think he will be yet again. So, yeah, as Daniel was saying again, I think it's a timeshare. But I do think Wilson eventually takes over, whether out playing or whether it's because of injury. Wilson's going to be starting for this Dolphins team. This offense is a great team to have a starter for. Colin Woods. Who should I start between Sutton or Jacoby Myers after this? You're asking sit-start questions for Week 10. We haven't even come close to Week 9 yet, Colin. I love it. I respect it. But honestly, I'm probably going Jacoby Myers. Just safer. I don't want to trust Sutton until I see it again. And I haven't. And Daniel Johnson will line with me again. My man, David Campanelli. Sorry for that delay on the call-in, brother. Good to see you.
Nice to see you, Wolf. How you doing today?
It's trade deadline day. You got some real action, some real riser fallers. No complaints here. Plus, spooky season just wrapping up. I always like the horror movie fix, all that good stuff. So I'm feeling good, Dave. Feeling good.
I felt a little traumatized by what CJ wore on Sunday. So, you know.
Oh, yeah. We're all still trying to recover from that one. Yeah.
That was a horror movie in and of itself.
Oh, yeah.
Just a couple quick questions for you.
Let's hit them.
Khalil Herbert is available in a full PPR still.
Yep.
Would you rather have Herbert over Gus Edwards rest of season?
Ooh, that's good. That's spicy. I think I have Edwards in all my leagues, and I think if I could swap him out and at least a couple of them for Herbert, I'd like that. I mean, Herbert standalone-wise is looking really good, and if and when he takes this thing over, and I think it's a matter of when, not if at this point, the sky's the limit. Whereas Edwards will always be in a timeshare. Dobbins will eventually come back, and I do love the bus. I don't want to sound like I don't like him. He had that goal line roll on block, but you just watch Herbert play. This guy's a next level player. Like, he just drops. And I think he's taking that thing over, but within the next couple of weeks. So yeah, I'd rather go Herbert. I think the ceiling's a lot higher.
And it's a full PPR league. What do you think about Kadarius Toney bringing, like, you think he's going to be like that Tyreek 2.0, or I picked him up, but now I may be having like buyer's remorse kind of thing.
So I think there's still a lot of upside to stashing him. I think you're going to have to be real patient with it. I don't think it's going to happen overnight here. And you're also dealing with, does he ever stay healthy? Huge if for him, obviously. Throughout his career, Giants fan, you know the absolute thrill and despair that Kadarius Toney can cause. So you've seen how good he can be. And if anybody's going to squeeze the most out of him, I do think it's Andy Reid. They gave up a third rounder for him. That's not insignificant. That's like decent draft capital here to pick him up a third and a fifth, if I'm not mistaken. So I do think they try very, very hard to get whatever they can out of him. It's just a matter of health. I don't think it's a talent thing, though. You look at all those rookie receiving metrics I like to talk about, yards per route run, targets per route, all that stuff that often will point to breakouts. He was breaking the charts on that last year. You have probably seen that 189-yard game against the Cowboys. You've seen the way that this guy can just take over not a receiving core, but an entire game. And now he's with the Chiefs. Now, he won't be Tyreek 2.0 because there is no Tyreek 2.0 ever. Not Toney especially. But there is limitless ceiling, honestly. Like, there is definitely high-end wide receiver too. Like, Juju's been pretty good, but he still isn't electric like Toney could be. Like, I mean, Toney could go crazy. So I am definitely a huge fan of hanging on to him with the preface of, no, like, if you have a bunch of bad bye weeks coming up, or you need a player that you can use right now, that probably isn't Toney. He's more of like a playoff stretch run. Maybe it's like that rookie season A.J. Brown where he just goes nuts for a few weeks. That's within Toney's range of outcomes, 100% in this offense with Andy Reid. You're just going to have to be patient for it. So it's a matter of, can you be patient or not at this point?
Awesome, Wolf. Thank you again. Everybody remember, like, subscribe, comment, get this thing to the moon. Let's go.
I love it. Thank you so much, David. Always a joy having your call-ins and checking in with you, buddy.
Talk to you later.
And as you said, that thumbs up button is so greatly appreciated. So if you're still here with us, getting your questions answered, please do us that solid, Wolfpack. Toss that thumbs up button. We got like almost 3,000 views just a couple of weeks ago because you guys were so generous hitting that thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing if you like what you're hearing and you want to be live with us multiple times. We love to get those repeat visitors over and over. We left off this one, Jacoby Myers and Courtland Sutton. I said Myers, like Daniel Johnson said. Does Hawkinson open up the field for Jefferson or limit his touches? I don't think it does anything different for Jefferson. Like, nothing's going to slow Jefferson down unless they added like Hopkins or something crazy. So no, he doesn't limit his touches. You're still getting Jefferson his design looks each and every week. I also don't think he doesn't much to open up the field. Like, the defensive coordinators aren't going to be like, oh no, we let's shade our coverage over to Hawkinson when we have Justin Jefferson over on the side. I think it's just largely neutral for Justin Jefferson. Not really much of a difference. If anything, maybe a few more looks than Irv Smith was seeing. Maybe he plays more of a full tight end role. than Irv Smith was. They gave him a second-round pick to get him, so you got to imagine they'll use him more than they were using Irv Smith. But I don't think it's going to be anything that costs Justin Jefferson. If anything, maybe Thielen, who's already in a little bit of a lower volume role. Drake or Dylan for Bubba Fett? If it's one to start this week, it's probably Drake, assuming Edwards is out. But if it's like season long or just a bench stash, Dylan still does have the upside of something that happens to Aaron Jones, you're looking at a top 6 running back. So 90% of situations I want Dylan, unless I am like 2-6. I need a Hail Mary running back and Dylan's not getting it done and you're hoping Edwards is out. Like in most cases, I'm going Dylan here. Hey, bro, Lockett or Rondale Moore? My man Mark, what's up, Gonzo? Haven't seen you in the Collins lately. Got to get my energy back from my guy. I got to go Lockett there. I mean, what's wrong with Lockett? You know, I do like Moore and all the stats I cited about him, but like Lockett's the souped up version of that, who's done it for 5-6 years. The track record's longer, the upside's more, and he's having a great year. What's he on pace for? Like 7 touchdowns, 1,100 yards, 98 catches. Pretty much a regular season for Tyler Lockett, which is a low-end receiver 1, high-end 2. We'd be gushing every fluid if Rondale Moore hit those levels. You're picking up Moore like to hope he can even sniff Lockett's jockstrap. So we keep locking around, my dude, for sure. Likely limits touches, but limits double teams as well. More yards for JJ, less TDs. Oh, we're talking about Hawkinson. I don't think it really does limit touches or double teams. I think Jefferson just largely the same, and that's a monstrous fantasy product each and every week. But maybe, I mean, who knows? It's more of a player than Irv Smith is. Let's put it that way. They wouldn't give him a second-round pick if not. Who could I trade with Sutton, Mike Williams, and not? I have the Sutton and Mike Williams combo, Colin, and it started out the year pretty strong for me, but obviously Mike in the IR, Sutton now probably benchable. The thing is, like, who wants any of these guys? Like, there's no way you're trading any of them to get a decent fantasy product. If you can, go for it. But I honestly don't know who I would recommend you go after because I don't think nobody in my league wants Sutton or Mike Williams while he's hurt. Nobody in my league I don't want Najee Harris. Do you? You're not trying to trade him if you did. The best thing I could say is go check out our trade value chart, rotostreetjournal.com, Colin. One of the best pieces, so many views coming in from our boy Jackson. He is so damn smart. He uses my rest of season big board, which you can also use to help kind of value, okay, this is what I could compare Sutton to. This is what I can compare Najee to. But I really don't think many people are going after. Of course, Mike Williams at the right price I'd want, but just check those resources out. It's probably an easier way to get it. Drake. So, yeah, if it's a start, it's Drake until Dylan gets more touches. If it's just a bench play, it's Drake. Prioritize Dubs or Deion Jackson in waivers. JT owner, he's dinged up. Ooh, it's a good one. It's a good one. It's like I prioritize Dubs probably still. I don't think I'd trade Hines if they were that worried about JT being dinged up. I just love what Dubs did. Like that touchdown was beautiful. Rodgers was pretty praiseworthy. Was acknowledging it too after throwing him under the bus. I can't trust this motherfucker. The exact quote. He was giving Dubs a little bit of a little BJ there. So I think that's huge. I think all the injuries around the court, like Dubs definitely could emerge as the number 1 receiver. I know he's had half the season to do it so far, but again, rookies often tend to start slow. If Dubs, we look back and we're like, damn, that second half stretch from that guy was insane. I could see Dubs being one of those guys. So most situations I go Dubs here. Deion Jackson definitely makes sense for your team as a JT owner though. But I guess this is kind of like, who's your next man up? Do you have a good backup? If Deion Jackson's not your handcuff, who would it be? If you can get a decent low-end running back 1 for Sutton and Najee, please do. I already got ET and Saquon and phone. Daniel Justin, appreciate again the way you've interacted with the chat. I don't know if you're still there, but love when you guys like help each other out, answer each other's questions, and for the most part, your answers have been solid. We're in lockstep with a lot of this. I already got ET and Saquon and Foreman. Good stuff. Good stuff. So you got some good backs there. Deion must own, but Moss pick. Yeah, it is a bummer, but I don't think Moss does anything. Moss sucks. Moss doesn't do shit. Like Deion is way better, and he's familiar with the team, and he's played real well every time he's used. Okay, is Cooper that wide receiver one? I'd probably prefer Sutton and Najee there is kind of what I'm thinking. Traded JT for Jacobs and Slayton. Wow. I mean, I think that's solid, Daniel. I think Jacobs is probably, if I was in a vacuum just going one or the other, I'd probably just take Jacobs. I guess Slayton doesn't really do much, but yeah. Buy low on CD. Great to see him playing. That gets even easier. So, yeah, I'm in. Wasn't thrilled with all the trades today. Man, it was a mad day. I'm with you. No Hunt. Like, what's up with that? No Elijah Moore. Yeah, some of these big names we're really hoping to see moved. Didn't. But still a lot of action. But I did go over that right around the time you asked the question on Kyren Williams. I don't think anything. His range of outcomes is like a high-end running back, too. If he takes over as the three-down horse, it's borderline useless, if not. So, yeah. Wilson is 83% owned. On Yahoo, he's 48%. So it depends where you're playing. That's why every site's different. He shouldn't be 83% owned anywhere either. He had that good week, but I don't know about that. Should I have Higbee for Everett rest of the season? I think so. He was in the block on like over half his snaps this last week, Higbee was. And Everett with no Mike Williams, I think the touchdown ceiling is through the roof. I guess it depends on Parham, but yeah. How do you feel about Mostert for this week's matchup with Wilson joining? They face who do the Dolphins face this week? The Bears, bad run D, giving up nearly 150 yards per game on the ground. I think Mostert is still a great play. It'll take so Wilson does have the familiarity with Mike McDaniels, but you still got to gel with your team. And I think Mostert, this is like his last week of being a 15 to 20 touch guy. I think Wilson starts to really nibble in a week or two. Michael Fawcett. I would have loved to see Cooks go to the Chargers, chip the ball. Oh, my God. That would have get me just a little movement right now thinking about it. Anywhere, really. Packers, Chargers, Chiefs, somewhere. But nope. Not a Cook owner, but should I drop Madison for Romeo Dubs and or Kenyan Drake? If you need the receiver help, I do think Dubs. But Madison's one of those handcuffs that just wins leagues if something happens to Cooks. So unless you really need the receiver help, I wouldn't bother with it. I go Cincy. Indy against the Pats isn't horrible either, but I go Cincy here. Giuseppe. Better pickup between A-Rob, Rondale, or Dubs. I go Rondale. No, I go Dubs is my favorite there. Talk me out of trading Jamar for Debo at 4-4. Don't do it. Debo you saw what Christian McCaffrey's role is going to be. And yeah, I know Debo didn't play, so we can't be like, that's what McCaffrey's going to do every week. But you got Debo on bye this week. Jamar didn't go to the IR, so they're probably only holding him out. If they needed to hold him out longer than 3 weeks, they probably would send him to the IR, right? So I think at most you're gaining a week with Debo versus Jamar locked in. I mean, the guy was back-to-back, 40-point days? Don't do it, Gerard. At 4-4, you can float. Go for Josh Palmer. Find a couple plugins here. Hope you go 500, 1-1 the next two matchups, and then you probably have Jamar Chase back. And you only got one extra week of Debo. Is he really going to be that much of a difference maker? I guess look at who you're facing too. Like if you're facing the top two teams in the league and you have no shot at winning unless you have a guy like Debo, then I guess maybe, but if you were really trading Jamar Chase, I would do my best to package Chase with something else and get a CMC. No one's going to do that though. Just don't do it. Don't do it. It's not a huge win. Debo has been Ayuk's out targeting him. Debo is just an amazing player. Love the guy, but fantasy role is high-end wide receiver too. You're giving up an elite player for a high-end wide receiver too. I wouldn't do it. We do have a super chat. My man, Michael Fawcett, thank you so much for the support. It is so greatly appreciated. It was a Brees owner. Appreciate your answers. Man, there hasn't been a more painful injury than that one this year, and maybe in the last couple of years. He was such a stud, Michael. I feel your pain here. Feel it real bad. You have Mostert, Connor, and Gibson. Who's going to end up my rest of the season running back two? Ooh. Good question. I mean, Mostert for the short. Wilson does take that over. Henry running back one. Ooh, baby. Love that. I don't know about Gibson being steady. We'd love to see him get moved, right? Robinson and Leeds is probably going to be the lead back, even though Gibson just looks way better. Maybe they do turn it back to him. If I had to bet on one of these guys, it's probably Connor if he could get healthy. But talk about ifs. What a big if that is. I think you got a good stable. I don't know that one of these guys is like, this is my guy the rest of the year. I think this one's going to come in waves, Michael. It's like Mostert this week, definitely. Then, Wilson comes in and takes over next week, and then it's Connor's back to full health, and you can ride him. And then there's going to be a matchup where the Commanders are down by 2 touchdowns, and Gibson looks good. This is going to be – I don't think you're going to have one clear-cut guy. I would say Jeff Wilson, if he's out there on your waivers, like if something happened to Mostert, now you've got your locked-in guy the rest of the year, right? So that's kind of what you're looking at. I would try to get Jeff Wilson big time if I'm you. That's what I'm looking at. Thank you so much for the support, Michael. I hope that gives you an answer. I know kind of like a non-answer going with your piecemeal in all 3, but that's one we're just riding the wave and seeing how we do, huh? All righty. We left up on Russo. Drop Darrell Henderson. He's useless. No, 4 carries and two catches with Ronnie Rivers being out touching him. Like, no need. Henderson serves no purpose. Lomi. I'm struggling with QB. I have Geno, Russ, and Dalton. That's tough. Geno's the best option there by a mile. Dalton not looking that bad, though. Looking to add Terrace Marshall. Yeah, he should have been an honorable mention here. 16-teamer, damn. Now, is this a 1 QB? It must be a 1 QB if it's 16-teamer. I'd get rid of Russ. I'm fucking done with Russ. Last week was like his best week in the whole season almost, and he had 13 points. Like I didn't know. Schedule does ease up on him, but I don't care. I'd rather Red Rifle and Geno, and honestly, maybe even just Geno. I don't think you need the other 2 guys. Tyrus Marshall's meh, but yeah. I think Russ is the drop there. You don't need 3 quarterbacks unless it's a 2-quarterback league. Jags, Vikings, or Chiefs? I'm going Vikings there, Giuseppe. Do I trade Pollard and Thielen for Josh Jacobs? Ooh, Uncle Tom. I want to say yes. Like Pollard, obviously, we just saw it. When Zeke's out, 30 points. But both times Zeke's been out, he's had 30 or more points. So you know the ceiling. The frustrating part is Jerry Jones insisting that if Pollard, when Zeke's back, he's our guy. We go as far as Zeke goes. Shut the fuck up. It's just so mind-numbing how much better Pollard is, how much better Pollard looks, and what he does for this offense, and that they can remain so stuck on the dumbass contract they gave Zeke. So I think Pollard is kind of what he is, a top 5 running back when Zeke's out and a meh flex play when Zeke's in. He's better than a meh flex play, a quality flex play. But Jacobs, yeah, he had a down week this week, but we had 3 back-to-back 30-point days. 3. No other running back had done that in like 20, like since LaDainian Tomlinson. So I think you did well. I think you do well if you do this trade because Thielen's like, yeah, whatever. So I would pull that deal, Uncle Tom. And Wolfpack, we got about 35, 40 of you again still here with us. Please do consider that thumbs up button. Keep giving us that last little push to get out to more people. Good, free, easy way to help us out, as is hitting that sub button if you're new around here and you want to join us. Do I got Palmer and Vikings defense and start Palmer over Samuel playing? I'm having a hard time following this one, Y2J. I would go Bengals just over Vikings. I would probably play Palmer over Curtis Samuel is my guess, is what you're getting at. Yeah, because they're playing Washington. Yeah, I like Palmer over Samuel this week. Atlanta, maybe the number 1 if Keenan sets. Yeah, I'm into it. Atlanta's a 32nd best matchup for wide receivers. Indy at New England, Cincy versus Carolina or Minnesota. A lot of similar defense to be brought up. I like Cincy here. I do think Minnesota might be the highest floor, though. Need to fill a running back for this brutal bye week. What do you think about dropping Rachaad White? Yeah, I would absolutely do that. I'd rather have Khalil Herbert as a stash and as a starter. So, yeah, as much as I bet how much I've been on that Rachaad White train, Bulldog, but I'd rather have Khalil Herbert for both stash purposes and startability. So, yeah, I'm all about it. Go for it. Would you drop either Goff or Stafford for Fields? Yes, Giuseppe, I'd drop either. I dropped Goff myself. But I'd drop Stafford over Goff, I think. Either. You pick your one. Neither. They're like both those guys are right around each other for me. So whichever one, I have Fields definitely higher than both rest of the season. Dump Hunt. It's tough tunes. It's similar to Dylan. Like, is he going to be all that usable? Probably not. But if something happens to Chubb, you know the upside. So it's like, are you holding Rachaad White? Because that's the same exact logic with a little bit more usability to Hunt. Hunt's still damn good. I wouldn't drop him unless you really, really need to. Drop Madison to pick up Wilson, Jeff Wilson. Ooh, Daniel, that's a good one. Probably hold Madison, but that's tough. That's good. That's real good. Is there anyone else you can drop, Daniel? I don't want to drop Madison because you know you do, and that's the second Cook goes down and you have a top 3 running back. Burrow over Fields this week. You know, Burrow didn't look great without Jamar Chase. Let's put it that way. I do have Burrow higher slightly, but if your gut told you Fields, that's not one I would be like, nope, you're dumb. Don't do it. I wouldn't be trying to force you away from it. I'd go Burrow myself if I had these 2 options, but you're not insane to consider it. I'll tell you that much, huh? Herbert or Hubbard? Herbert, definitely. 110%. Khalil Herbert. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Henry's absolutely it. Trade K. Drake and Drake London for Lockett. Yeah, I would do it. As much as I love London, the player, if they are as run heavy as they are, if they don't like to throw to him or Pitts, what's his value? Drake, you might get one more week out of it until Gus Edwards is back. So, yeah, absolutely Lockett there. I'm into it. You're welcome, Gerard. You're welcome, Michael. Thank you guys for your kind banners. Drop Gibson to pick up Wilson for the handcuff then, or I don't know. I don't think I'd drop any of those 3 for Wilson as much as I love him. I mean, Donta Foreman would definitely – that might be your answer right there. You can get him somehow. That's the answer to your prayers right there, Michael. Here's what I would do. Can you drop your kicker for Wilson for now? And then let it play out. Maybe you can move someone to the IR. Maybe you can package a deal with 2 guys for 1, and then you don't have to cut anybody. I'm a big fan of like cutting my kicker or my defense, letting the week kind of play out, making whatever moves I can, and then figuring it out from there. And especially if you can pick up like a Sunday night football or a Monday night football kicker and you let the week play out and you just check all those bench guys. Because what if Mostert does go down? And then you have Jeff Wilson ready on your bench, you know? So that I love just waiting out as long as I can for my kicker or my defense. It's only ESPN doesn't let you do that. So it really depends where you play, Michael, on that. But obviously if Foreman's there, go get him now. And if you can cut your kicker to make all these moves and then figure it out later, I would do that. Apex, trying to get some trades through right now. Someone is so in need of running back, he would give me Godwin for – oh, God, yeah. Hey, geez. Hammer that, accept it. What a moron. I think your league might veto that. Like, I hate vetoes. I could go on a 10-minute rant about vetoes right now, and I'd probably smash my computer by the end of it because I'd be so pissed. I think vetoes are so dumb. If someone's that desperate, you're being smart, and you're preying on them. Rip him to shreds and do that deal now. Oh, my God, that is unbelievable if you can pull that off, Apex. Should I pick up Drake or Edmonds? Not starting either one this week for Mark Yasko. Can I say neither? I don't want Edmonds in a 3-headed committee on the second lowest scoring offense in the league. Drake, if you're not using him this week, I don't know that you'll ever use him. So is Jeff Wilson there? Is Kyren Williams there? Is Deion Jackson as a handcuff there? You know, I think there's a lot more upside. Like Drake's ahead of Jackson in my rankings because of his usability. But if you're not using him, then what's the point? Rachaad White, Mark Yasko, is he there? You know how many times I've talked about him, right? Like, go for the upside stashes. Kyren, Rachaad White, go for those Hail Marys. Instead, Jeff Wilson, 100% in the top there. All righty, guys, that wraps up our comments. So thank you again so much. On your way out, that thumbs up button would be so greatly appreciated. Subbing if you're new here and you haven't already joined the Wolfpack, it would be so greatly appreciated as well. And you can check out all our content at rotostreetjournal.com besides the video and stuff. Tons of great articles. So good, my rankings, everything up there. So check it out because in a world of fantasy sheep, be that wolf. Later, guys.